welcome to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. Both of us sporting Detroit apparel today. Morgan, yours just came in the mail.
Yes, because as I pointed out on Instagram, because when you're here in Toronto, you see all these people in these Toronto versus everybody t-shirts, which are a blatant ripoff of this idea right here, Tommy Walker. The design comes from a guy named Tommy Walker in Detroit, and the guys in Toronto, the Peace Collective, who first said they were inspired by the Raptors run Raptors playoff run in 2014, just inspired out of the blue to make a t-shirt that looked exactly like this one right here.
By accident.
Then amended their story and said, "Oh, we were just on the internet and we found this design. We didn't know it belonged to anyone, even though where is it? Registered trademark.
There's an R right there.
So clearly
yeah.
the design belongs to someone. At least just give credit where it's due."
Well,
Jeez.
We're going to talk about lots of liars today on today's program as we go back and talk about Canelo Cotto. Like I said, I decided to wear Detroit apparel because I knew you were going to be wearing that.
Yes.
My Gross Eel track and field sweater that I picked up. It was a big weekend in track and field as well, the NCAA cross-country championships. What a great day in sports. Watch some cross-country, watch my girl Molly Seidel win gold, and then boxing all day long.
All day.
Fantastic day, and a pretty entertaining main event between Cotto and Canelo.
Yes.
Not the fight of the year that...
fight of the year was in the co-feature.
Fight of the year might have been in the co-feature, and we'll get to that as well. Takashi Miura and Francisco Vargas. What an amazing fight that was. But Cotto and Canelo, we'll start with this. I didn't think this was a particularly difficult fight to score.
No.
I certainly didn't think there was a way to score that for Miguel Cotto. Could you have scored it a little closer than some of the judges who had it like 10-2? I think you could, but I still didn't think if I were on the table ringside of this one that I would have strained too much.
No, it was a clear Canelo win. 8-4 in rounds, maybe 9-3. I didn't necessarily see it more than 9-3 for Canelo. Would not have ever seen it less than 8-4 for Canelo. But it was the fight you thought it would be once you adjusted for Cotto's brains.
Right,
because
exactly.
Again, as we discussed last week, it was tough to make a call here just because we'd seen Canelo beat up on guys that since the Mayweather fight, beat up on guys that weren't much for strategy, weren't much for skills, and you didn't know if Cotto's smarts would tip the scales more in his favor this time. They kept Cotto in the fight to an extent, but Canelo, because he's bigger, stronger, was massive.
He's huge, man.
You talking about a catch weight fight?
I can't remember if they showed what they rehydrated to. I don't think they did. But do you want to take some guesses? You want to play
He looked north of 175.
Yes,
to me,
I agree. He was definitely 175 or above.
Because if Brandon Rios was 170 against Bradley, Canelo was north of 170 easily.
Well, you think of
he's bigger and he was more muscular. Muscle is much more dense than fat.
Well, think of and rest in peace to Bob Foster, by the way. One of his former opponents, Dick Tiger.
Right.
When Dick Tiger moved up to 175, he was still, stocky, 160-pound Dick Tiger who happened to sort of beef up a little bit. That was the size that Canelo looked like to me. He looked like a 1960s light heavyweight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's in terms of in terms of fight night weight. What you had was Sugar Ray Robinson fighting for the light heavyweight title at 157 pounds against Joey Maxim, and Cotto's hitting Canelo with everything he has, and it's just bouncing off him like raindrops. Canelo's laughing at this, and
because of that, all of the all the talk about what impact that catch weight was going to have at 155 pretty much turned out to be null and void. Because, these were two guys who both naturally weren't middleweights.
Right.
Canelo had never fought up there either.
Right.
And Cotto is not at all a natural 160-pounder, as we saw. The fact that he weighed in at 153 and a half.
Yes.
So the catch weight didn't really make any difference. In fact, it actually enabled Canelo to weigh in a pound over what he normally weighs in at.
Yes. And what that said to me, too, and we'll get to this, as the Canelo Triple G talk intensifies. What I'm not going to want to hear from Canelo's camp is that he's not big enough to fight a middleweight, because when you come to the ring and because he didn't get on the scale before the fight, he didn't get on the HBO scale before the fight, so we don't know what he walked into the ring at. But when the eyeball when the eyeball test says that you're at least 175, then you can't now tell us that you can't comfortably fight at 160.
Well, what a slick move then, by the way, to not step on that scale.
No.
Because now there's no actual evidence that can tell you, hey, I weighed anything.
Because then you can always just say, what is your eye?
Right.
Who are you?
Who are you?
Your eyeball
I
test.
made the weight. All right. So, but that isn't going to matter anyways, because Canelo has said, I'm not going to fight him above 155 pounds. You can come down to my weight.
Right.
So it doesn't really make a difference.
Which is fair.
People are going to get on you for saying this is fair, by the way. He's the middleweight title holder, Morgan. He should defend it at 160 pounds.
When you talk about how boxing is now, and we talk about the business that boxing is, because Canelo says, wait a minute, I'm the guy here with the fans. Like, I was in the third biggest selling pay-per-view ever, the Mayweather Canelo fight. That did 2.2 million because Mayweather's who he is, but also because I am who I am. This fight's going to do big numbers. Who are you? You did 97,000 pay-per-views. It's great that people think you're the next guy. You did 97,000 pay-per-views. Now, if you want to get into the million pay-per-view range, if you are involved in a million pay-per-views selling fight, Triple G, it's because I'm in the fight, not because you're in the fight. And if you want some of this money, you're going to do what I say.
Yeah.
And what I say is come down to my weight, which is, again, because of the way boxing business is done now, it's not unusual. Not that unfair. The rules say middleweight is anything above 154 and below 160. So he could say make 154 and a half if he feels like it. So it's completely in keeping with the current rules of the game.
Well, I mean, listen, to bring this all full circle, and our man Scott Chris pointed this out as well, to bring it back to Bob Foster. He beat Dick Tiger for the light heavyweight title, a middleweight. This happens all the time, but also look at the lineage of the middleweight title right now. So Canelo just won that title at a catchweight determined by Miguel Cotto.
Yep.
Miguel Cotto beat Sergio Martinez, who won that middleweight title at a catchweight as well. You know, so like
who did Martinez beat for that title?
He beat Kelly Pavlik,
and that was it when.
That's right. He beat Paul Williams.
For the middleweight title.
No, now we're confusing it. We're making ourselves look really bad right now.
Again, on the commercial break, we're going to have to
check exactly. We're going to have to look that up. Nonetheless, but this is a title that has been defended at a catchweight over and over again.
And again, and we'll come back to Oscar De La Hoya's ridiculous, not just his ridiculous letter, but what that letter says about his crazy way of looking at the world.
Yes.
But Oscar De La Hoya will criticize people for catchweights, even though when Oscar De La Hoya fought Bernard Hopkins for Bernard Hopkins' middleweight title, catchweight.
At a catchweight, yeah.
157.
Yep.
So as much as Oscar De La Hoya last week will complain about people using catchweights, he himself will do it, and he's not going to advise Canelo not to do this because this is, again, at this level of the business, these are the rules that they're playing by.
Sorry, I messed it. Yes, he did win it from Kelly Pavlik. I was right. But then he defended against Paul Williams. The second, remember the rematch?
Yeah, the big
against
knockout.
Paul Williams, the big knockout was at a catchweight as well. So he defended his title at a catchweight there.
Right.
Whatever.
So, but again,
it's just
let's not act like all of this stuff is unprecedented. Like this is going to be the first time this has ever been done because again, this is what these guys are doing now.
Well, and Floyd sort of pointed that out as well in one of the few interviews where he actually expounded upon things. And he said, when I fought Oscar, I gave up all the demands were out the window. But when you become an A-side and you're at this level of the sport where you're selling pay-per-views, where you're a 500,000 guy or you're a million pay-per-view guy, this is how it works now. And who are we to tell Canelo to give up some of those advantages that everyone else around him is using? Because I'm sure if Triple G were in the situation and he were the million pay-per-view guy, he were the superstar, he would make those same demands. You telling me K2 Promotions would just give things up just because? No, they don't. Right. They would never do that.
The only people that just gave stuff up just because, as we were discussing offline, was Golden Boy. When they were negotiating Canelo versus Mayweather, and Mayweather said, hey, I want to fight for your belt, but at the weight I want. And Golden Boy said, okay.
Yeah.
And then complained after, well,
they wouldn't get the fight either.
Well, right.
But now they want that fight again. Now they want Mayweather for Canelo to come back 1 week after You lambaste the guy in Playboy, and then a couple days after that, say, hey, I reneged that. Let's bury the hatchet. Now I want to make a fight. You guys are in a lawsuit against one another. This fight isn't going to happen, but people are going to get fooled, and he's going to be able to say, see, Mayweather doesn't want to come out of retirement. We challenged him.
Of course Mayweather doesn't want to come out of retirement. He's 39 years. He's going to be 39 years old.
Beat him already.
Beat the guy already, first of all. Second of all, De La Hoya, you can't say boxing is better without Floyd Mayweather. No one's going to miss Floyd Mayweather 1 week and then turn around and say, hey, Mayweather, why don't you come out of retirement and fight my guy again? Now that you're another year older and slower, and he's another year bigger and stronger, and he's as big as a house and makes the weight. But boxing doesn't miss you, but please come back so that my guy can get paid. Doesn't make any sense. And as I was saying on Twitter this morning, you're free to hate Floyd Mayweather. Listen.
Yeah, please.
He's a snake in a lot of ways. You're free to hate him. But that doesn't mean that anything Oscar says makes sense.
No.
These two things are completely unrelated.
Yes.
Completely unrelated. And let's also note the fact that Oscar, in this letter, berates Mayweather for beating up on old guys. Berates Mayweather for beating up on old guys, but now wants to follow Canelo's win over a 35-year-old Miguel Cotto with a fight against a 39-year-old welterweight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, either, Oscar, either you don't approve of fighters padding their records by beating up on old guys, or you want this fight. But it can't be both. It cannot be both. The guy's about to be 39 years old, is retired, is a welterweight, and you want him to fight this monstrous junior welterweight, this monstrous junior middleweight, a guy who we just saw come to the ring at 175 pounds. Either these fights are okay with you or they're not.
Well, hey, Bernard Hopkins is talking about still coming back maybe to face Arthur Abraham in the new year. That's what he told me just the other day. Would you be shocked if he came back and fought Canelo? Speaking of picking on old guys, would you be shocked if that happened? I wouldn't be totally shocked.
No, but Bernard's at the point where, again, he's, except for the Kovalev fight. Was it the Kovalev fight?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's not going to fight guys unless he knows he can win.
Right.
Unless he sees like an obvious glaring error in your style and something that he knows you're not going to fix.
Right.
And that he can just pick on that all night. I don't know that Canelo is that person anymore.
No. I think that Canelo is improved, and Canelo will also be huge for the weight class, and Bernard is old, and we'll have to cut all the way down.
Yes.
But we'll talk more about what could potentially be next for Canelo. We'll talk more about what could potentially be next for Miguel Cotto and the rest of the pay-per-view undercard. Some good, some not all that exciting. All right, we'll talk about that when we come back here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you, breaking down Canelo Alvarez's win over Miguel Cotto from this past weekend in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Mandalay Bay. Pretty much everyone agreed that Canelo Alvarez decisively won that fight. Yes. Except Miguel Cotto, which is standard procedure for Miguel Cotto.
Miguel Cotto has never lost.
He's never lost a fight in his entire life.
No.
Even the fights he absolutely has lost, he still thinks that he's won that fight. And maybe, not maybe, but certainly, that kind of delusion to whatever degree is necessary if you want to be a great athlete.
Yes.
So I can give him a pass on that front, but at the same time, Miguel Cotto didn't win this fight, and no one should listen to him right now.
No. What amazed me about this, and what the fight really revealed, right, was that Cotto in his previous fights under Freddie Roach was this really aggressive fighter, and that was the storyline, right? That Freddie Roach had allowed Cotto to tap into his inner killer, and he's out here walking people down and dismantling them with that left hook to the body, and everything else flows from that. But what you had in this fight was a Canelo Alvarez that was so big and so strong that Killer Cotto couldn't do anything with him, because Killer Cotto had no business staying inside and exchanging, trading punches with a guy he couldn't hurt and a guy who could hurt him. So then he went back to the Cotto that we had seen before Freddie Roach took over.
Cuban school of boxing, Miguel Cotto.
Yeah.
Up on his toes.
Boxer, puncher, mobile Miguel Cotto, who's still a great fighter, but just not the guy that that Freddie Roach had unleashed upon the 154-pound and 160-pound divisions. So Cotto was a little bit of a man without a country in this fight because Killer Cotto wasn't going to get it done against Canelo, but neither was Boxer Puncher Cotto.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of tapping into Killer Canelo was that Boxer Puncher Canelo had become kind of stale. Boxer Puncher Cotto had become kind of stale.
Well, and looking at what we saw the physical matchup to be in this fight, the only way for Cotto to have won this fight was to be insanely busy in terms of his punch count. And 35-year-old Miguel Cotto, with the wear on his body, wasn't going to be that guy. And it speaks also to the accuracy, the precision, and the power of Canelo in this fight, because usually as a judge, I think I favor volume.
Yes.
I think a lot of people naturally do, because you can't always tell, especially from watching TV, whether things are landing or not.
Who's busier and more aggressive.
Yeah, and usually I disagree with those people who are like, oh, he was landing the harder shots, and I'm like, watch the rest of that round.
Right.
In this case, Canelo's work was so effective and so eye-catching that I didn't find it difficult to score any of the rounds.
Also, Canelo was punching with two hands, whereas Cotto, as I was saying on Twitter, it sort of felt like watching a Juanma Lopez fight.
Yeah.
The lead hand is doing all the work.
Yes.
The right hand every now and then throws it. But when a guy is bigger than you are and takes your punch really well, is rattling you with every single shot, and you're firing back with one hand and he's using two, any advantage you might have had has gone to the other guy. So there wasn't a whole lot Cotto could do. Like, he had his moments. He won 3 rounds, maybe 4. But just over the course of a fight, when the guy is bigger than you are, maybe faster than you are, much stronger than you are, to fight him with one hand, and again, and to have to revert to a strategy that you hadn't used much lately, there were too many things working against Cotto in that fight.
Well, and then the one-handedness, there were technical reasons for that too. It wasn't like Canelo was overly busy. He wasn't. No. He was fairly judicious with his punch out, but his jab was really heavy.
Yes.
It was accurate when he threw it, and you saw a lot during this fight. Cotto bringing, and I just knocked my microphone out of place, but you saw him bringing his right hand across his face all the time to try and parry the jab.
Yes.
Sort of giving himself a little extra there because he wasn't slipping it, so he was trying to knock everything down.
Yes.
So that took his right hand away. Number 2, he was worried about that left hook.
Yes.
So he wanted to keep his right hand glued to his face at all times. He wanted to do most of his work with his left, not have that left hook coming back and clocking him.
Right, but what he also ran into were a lot of right hands over the jab, and then just lead right hands, which I didn't quite expect to see, but
Slick boxer Canelo, the guy he always thought he was.
Yes.
It's
all. I love that moment in any Canelo fight where he actually starts successfully evading punches, and he has this look on his face like, I can't believe I did it.
It's like that Richard Pryor skit when he starts landing a couple jabs and suddenly he's moving his head for no reason. Yeah.
But, there are only so many counter right hands and lead right hands that Cotto was going to be able to take. Before he started slowing down. And Cotto's face isn't really, because Cotto's face gets lumped up even in fights he wins. That's just he's like Joe Frazier. That's just the way he's going to look. But you could tell after a few rounds, those heavy right hand counters and right hand leads really started to wear on Cotto. And again, he just didn't have the firepower to make Canelo think twice about anything he was doing.
So what next for Miguel Cotto, I guess, is the question, because Canelo has all the options. He has hopefully Triple G for the sake of boxing fans out there, but Cotto still is going to be a moneymaker.
Yes.
I don't know how profitable another pay-per-view with Miguel Cotto would be, especially not at the $15 million price tag that he's commanding for his purse.
Yes.
So that's difficult, but things do expand for him in terms of his options, in that he still could be a welterweight. He came into this fight at 153.5, which suggests to me he didn't really have to cut a whole lot. Although, he could still get down to 47 if he wanted to.
That was lean Miguel Cotto. It's hard to tell how lean Miguel Cotto is because he has so many tattoos.
That's true.
You look closely, he was pretty lean.
Yeah.
And Miguel Cotto's not a guy who over the course of his career has been super lean, and he's always had trouble. When you see Miguel Cotto start to struggle to take punches, it's usually because he's
got too much,
weight. So I don't know how much lower than 153 he can go comfortably without compromising his ability.
But maybe another catch weight against one of those welterweights.
Right.
The thing is, who is he actually able to work with? Because Cotto, one of the reasons Cotto has been able to make so much money is because
he's a free agent.
He's a free agent,
yes.
Especially the latter half of his career. He's been able to fight Mayweather. He's been able to fight Pacquiao. He's been able to work with anyone and whoever he wants. But if he's with Rock Nation, who has a long-standing lawsuit still with Al Heyman,
yes.
All of those PBC guys are out the window.
Yep.
So he can still only pluck from the Golden Boy pool and the Top Rank pool, and he doesn't really want to work with Bob Arum all that much either because they've been having words in the media too.
Yes.
So now that I actually thought about this a little bit, maybe the options aren't as plentiful.
No, and especially, again, at Cotto's age and at Cotto's level of mileage, because Cotto's been doing this a long time, and Cotto's had some really rough fights. The first Margarito fight, the Mayweather fight, the Pacquiao fight. They haven't been easy fights. So at 35, and then this fight, he took a beating.
Mm-hmm.
So at 35, I don't know how much longer he can do this at a high level. He's going to get to the point where he can keep beating guys. They just won't be really good guys. Or he can keep fighting the elite and losing as often as he wins. And he's at the point where he's going to have to make that choice and then figure out if it's worth it to him.
Well, not to mention, we're getting the rap signal right now, but how do you market a guy to Americans who puts his headphones on during the Star-Spangled Banner? What a disrespectful
jerk. He's going to have to go full heel.
Oh, how do you explain that? No. Good thing Donald Trump wasn't watching.
Even though Miguel Cotto is a U.S. citizen.
That's right.
He was born in Rhode Island.
Yeah, he
Add
is,
him
actually.
to the list
That's right.
of, famous Puerto Ricans who were born in the mainland United States. Alex Rios.
That's right, yeah.
Coffee, Alabama.
All right, coming up after the break, we're going to talk about Guillermo Rigondeaux and his...
Viva!
Yeah.
La Revolution.
The Revolution did continue. It wasn't all that entertaining, but it was televised.
Yes, it was.
And Takashi Miura and Francisco Vargas basically stole the show in Vegas over the weekend. We'll talk about that when we return here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. This past weekend also marked the return of our boy, Guillermo Rigondeaux.
El
Chacal back in the ring against Rian Francisco. And that fight was over the moment the contract was signed.
Yes.
At no point was it ever competitive. At no point was it ever entertaining. And we are massive defenders.
I love El Chacal.
Yes.
That fight was boring.
We are massive
that
defenders
fight was
of
so boring,
of
and I love El
Rigondeaux.
Chacal.
The problem is, if you were to watch Rigondeaux do the exact same thing against a top-level fighter, you could find some entertainment in that because you would be watching and saying, "Wow, how is he able to completely neutralize someone like this, like a Nonito Donaire?"
Yes.
But when you're watching him against a guy in Drian Francisco who would struggle in domestic fights in the Philippines, perhaps.
Yes.
It suddenly is no longer impressive, nor is it entertaining.
There's a few things. God bless El Chacal. Y viva la revolución. But there's just a lot that Rigondeaux either doesn't know, doesn't understand, or just hasn't bothered to learn or and internalize about the business of boxing. First is that if you watch YouTube videos from when Rigondeaux first arrived in Miami, and read news reports, a lot of them aren't in English, but if you can understand Spanish, because I don't know how well Google Translate works.
In the Nuevo Herald?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, Guillermo Rigondeaux fully believes, that he's going to make $100 million. This is what he was told when he came to the United States.
Yep.
There's $100 million. You know how good you are? $100 million paydays worth. There are not $100 million worth of paydays for a guy like Guillermo Rigondeaux, regardless of how entertaining he is. Period.
He's lucky to have received $100,000
in his head
per fight.
So his career is unfolded the way it's unfolded. In his head, he feels like and in a lot of ways he has been wronged, but in his mind it's compounded because he's still thinking, hey, where's my $100 million? I beat everyone. And he still thinks that this isn't different from amateur boxing, that if I beat the person, I'm going to get to the next person and make more money. Whereas in pro boxing, everywhere, but in the United States especially, it's about entertainment value. And you don't have to be an exciting fighter. Floyd Mayweather proved that. His style was sort of like not the X's and O's of his style, but his approach to the sport. Very similar to Rigondeaux's, except not as extreme.
Right.
Point is, Mayweather's not what you would traditionally consider exciting, but made a ton of money because he sold excitement and everything around the fight. But Rigondeaux doesn't do that because he still thinks he's very much that he's still in that amateur. And I don't think he's ever going to get out of it.
No.
That this is a sport. I land more punches than you. I win. Fine, you win. But if you're not entertaining people either in the ring or outside of it, then people aren't going to spend their money on you, and you're not going to get you were never going to get your $100 million.
No,
but you're not.
No, but it also in this case it did Rigondeaux a disservice to even put him on this pay-per-view against Rion Francisco.
Yes.
But the problem is, so Rock Nation acquires this guy, and if you say, okay, you're going to fight Francisco, but you're going to have to do it off TV for X amount of money, Rigondeaux might not even do it.
Yes.
So he might not stay active. You have to. They're in this conundrum where they have to keep him active to get him a fight that is going to be a little bit more competitive or against a better guy. But in order to do that, they have to put him on television, and he's going to bore a lot of people.
Yes.
And that's unfortunate.
And you can't impress upon him, hey, we're in the entertainment business now. This guy's overmatched. Go out there and make it exciting. Because in El Jackal's head, why should I make it exciting? It's not a business.
Gold medals were what mattered to him his entire life, right?
This is a sport.
Win.
If I beat the guy, I win. I'm a winner. Pay me. It doesn't work that way.
Listen, at least he splurged on a pair of gold grills.
Yes.
So his image, his branding is certainly improving.
And that's part of what it is, because now Rock Nation thinks that they're going to make him into a superstar, and they're not. He doesn't have a superstar personality. Like, if you can't have the superstar style of fighting, you got to have a superstar personality. If you don't have either, then you're not going to be that. And maybe this is part of like in the hip hop world, it's part of what he's sort of like back in the day in the Source magazine, Unsigned Hype.
Right.
Where there's this idea that, there's all these underground rappers that are better than everyone you've ever heard.
These papoose.
Right, but they've just never had the opportunity. But hey, you give this guy a chance, he's going to destroy everyone. And Rigo kind of comes from that background, right? Because he's the guy who won in his biggest fight and does have a legit gripe against his promoter because the promoter refused to promote him. And the Nonito fight was not boring. The Nonito fight was intriguing. That was a high-level match of skills and speed. Problem is, the fights he's had since then haven't been anywhere near as entertaining. But the idea that you can take this guy who's been unsigned hype, and turn him into Jay-Z, turn him into whoever else is the hottest selling rapper right now in the ring. Again, if your style isn't exciting, your personality better be. And if neither are exciting, and this is what Rigondeaux is, if neither of these things is exciting, then you can only ever expect, like the most he can hope for now is that Lomachenko match, which won't be exciting.
No.
As much as HBO guys hype Lomachenko, what it will be is an old style amateur fight, like the point fighting that no one liked.
For 36 minutes.
Yes.
Exactly.
For 12 straight rounds.
12
rounds of fencing in boxing gloves.
Well, listen, we got to hit the break here, but if anyone is up for the job of trying to sell Guillermo Rigondeaux to normal people, it is the new head of Rock Nation president, Michael Yormark, whose old job it was to try to sell a sport on ice to people in Florida.
Yes.
So he's dealt with this stuff before. He might be fighting the same losing battle.
Yes.
All right. On the other side of the break, we'll talk about a fight that really was exciting. Francisco Vargas and Takashi Miura. We also have the heavyweight title on the line this weekend. Vladimir Klitschko and Tyson Fury, and some PBC action on NBC. Plenty to get to, so we'll be right back here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. So the main event between Cotto and Canelo didn't necessarily deliver a fight of the year. Guillermo Rigondeaux and Rion Francisco certainly did not. But Francisco Vargas and Takashi Miura, quite possibly might have. And I would say, I mean, this fight had absolutely everything you could ask for. The only thing that does this fight a disservice, and we see this all the time, because every year we get a great fight that's on a major pay-per-view undercard. And ultimately, when you're on a major pay-per-view undercard, you're in a big venue in Las Vegas, and the people don't show up until the main event. And part of what makes fights memorable and enjoyable, there's still a sonic aspect to these fights that comes from the crowd, that comes from the commentators, and the commentators feed off of the energy in the crowd. And the only thing that this fight was lacking, because it had everything else from blood to dramatic turnarounds, everything
dramatic turnarounds,
was just the fact that there was no one in the arena for most of it. And that's not their fault.
The first couple rounds, I couldn't tell if this fight was actually as exciting as it seemed, or if it just seemed more exciting in contrast to Rigo's fight. But no, it was... Miura, I'll never understand why Miura doesn't just move his head. Like you would think after that first thunderous right hand he took, the one that almost dropped him in the first round,
that
he would say to himself, hey, wait a minute. Let me move to my right. Let me move my head out of the path of these straight right hands. Nope. He just took every single one. Hoping, it was like the Homer Simpson strategy. I hope you'll get tired of hitting me before
you'll fall down. Yeah.
Right. But he's such a crude, compelling fighter. He's so far removed from what Rigondeaux is.
Yes. Very much in the spirit of the other Japanese action fighters.
Yes.
Who have a very similar style.
Yeah. And he winds up paying for it. And I watched that fight and started. I don't usually think about like the long-term damage during the fight. Usually it's after the fight. I'm like, whoa, yeah, it's gonna take that guy a long time to recover from that. But by mid-fight, I was wondering how long it's gonna take each of these guys to recover from this fight and how much they're gonna have left, for the rest of their careers. But this was compelling action. How much did they make? 'Cause I want to say they
about $100K each.
Career high payday for guys?
Probably, yeah. Probably. Well, maybe not for Miura.
Right.
Because some of those cards...
In Japan
on New Year's or whatnot, he might have made a little bit more. And maybe he still got some on the back end from Japanese television.
Right.
I'm not privy to that, but I think it was in and around the $100K range.
Yeah. Well, Vargas, both of them, if they take a long vacation, they've earned it. And if you guys didn't get it... what was amazing to me, too, is that it felt like one of these fights that... Because Vargas's eye was so severely cut below the eye, above the eye, and I don't know how much longer that fight was gonna last.
Yes,
if there wasn't a knockout, and you saw
that fight almost got stopped the previous round.
Yeah, well, if you saw it too, before the 9th round, they go to Vargas's corner, and he's got the corner man, and there's the one guy just using his fingers to try to close the cut.
Yeah.
With his fingers. What are your fingers made of? That you can just press two pieces of skin together, and
go back together.
Yeah. Now, I've never been cut like that, but from interviewing cut men, they've told me. And listen, pain in boxing is all relative. There's stuff that they say doesn't really hurt, but that's like just relative to stuff that's sheer agony.
Yes.
So it hurts more than to us. It would be agony. To them. But what I've been told is like if you have to get cut, above the eyelid is bad in terms of bleeding, but in terms of pain, it hurts less than getting cut elsewhere because there aren't as many sensory neurons in your eyelid as there are in other parts of your body.
But end swell is apparently the worst thing.
Right.
Apparently that's just trying to physically drive cold steel into your face so as to temporarily remove swelling. That's just going to come back
later
the
on.
Next round is apparently the worst.
Right.
That was just a fantastic fight. If you haven't seen this fight, find a way to get it. We're going to give you our YouTube picks of the week later on, but this is just a fight that absolutely everyone should watch.
If HBO is smart, they will either include this in the Fury Klitschko broadcast. Yeah. Or find a way to get this on YouTube, and they'll get some AdSense money.
Yep.
And put it out there, promote it. This is the other thing that we talk about all the time, because people who parachute in and out of boxing talk about how main events are disappointing. Doesn't mean the sport's boring, because again, there's a lot of very exciting action out there. It just doesn't always get
doesn't know what's happening in the main event.
Right. So if you are HBO, if you're Golden Boy, if you're Rock Nation, let people see this fight. Like, put it out there. This is as good of advertising as anything for the product you're trying to sell.
Well, and
so do it.
Exactly, because there will be people. We'll hit the break in a second. There will be people who say, "Hey, I paid $59.99 hoping for the fight of the year. I didn't get it." You might have. It just didn't happen in the main event.
Yes.
You can't be disappointed in this, and don't complain about wasting your $60 because if you're sitting at home watching this fight by yourself for some reason, you have some other issues to work with. Your friend should chip in
because again,
you only wasted $10 on this.
If you think every single fight is indicative of whether or not the entire sport is exciting, then you might be the guy who watched 10 rounds of Rigo and said, "I'm never watching boxing."
That's it.
Next.
I'm watching House Hunters International instead. That's enough. All right, we're going to talk about the action that is coming up this weekend when we come back. Klitschko Fury. We have Jamal Charlo in action. Plenty to get to. We'll talk about that when we return here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. Plenty of boxing action coming up this weekend. Notably, the heavyweight title of the world is on the line. Vladimir Klitschko defending against Tyson Fury in what might be the most intriguing, for me, heavyweight fight in a long time. Not because I don't think that Klitschko is going to win, but because the build-up to this has been amusing.
Yes.
And the fight, that Fury is going to try his absolute heart out to make this as entertaining as possible.
Yeah, Fury, I don't know that Fury's overly skilled. He's not, but Fury's massive. And for the first time in a long time, Klitschko's not just going to have a size advantage going into the fight. And what this fight might turn out to be, and again, Klitschko's old. He's old. Is he 40 yet? He's not 40.
Not quite.
He's close. He's old. And I understand this heavyweight years. He's still old. Now, Fury's the oldest looking 27-year-old you're likely to see.
Yes, which is because he spars with no headgear.
Yes.
Against his brother.
But this might turn out to be... Fury might be to Klitschko what the other Klitschko was to Lennox Lewis. Or was it this Klitschko?
It was the other Klitschko.
Yeah, what the other Klitschko was to Lennox Lewis. So it's a fight that Klitschko can win, should win, but just might wind up paying a really high price. And this might be the fight that prompts him to say, "Hey, you know what? I got a bunch of money at home. Maybe this isn't worth it to me anymore. And even though I'm better than these guys, I'm still getting older, and these guys are just getting younger every year. In the grand sense, I will always be better than all of them." But 40 is 40.
Well, and when it comes to Tyson Fury, maybe he turns out to be a threat, maybe he doesn't. But I think that the fact that he's been dropped by Nevin Pikic and dropped by Steve Cunningham also obscures the fact that for a guy his size, he actually is remarkably skilled. This is a guy who actually moves around the ring and throws combinations, does more than just a 1-2, has some creativity with his offense. Guys who are as big as Tyson Fury, they usually look like Alexander Ustinov.
Yep.
They are big ogres who are absolutely unentertaining.
Yes.
Fury is the antithesis of that.
Yes. And I'm sure it drives some of his traveler cousins nuts.
That
he's so dedicated to ring boxing and not the real thing. If you guys because I don't know how much you guys know about Tyson Fury, but he comes from a tradition of Irish travelers. He's from England, but he fought for the Irish heavyweight title.
Yes, that's right.
If you guys ever get a chance to watch, and I'm not going to tell you not to watch Vice, but Vice's thing is to pretend they've discovered stuff that has already been discovered. They're like the Christopher Columbuses of journalism. Hey, we found this thing, even though it's already been found.
Brooklyn Fight Club,
right? If you guys get the chance, watch a documentary called Knuckle, and it's about these guys in Ireland. Most of them are related; they're like distant cousins, and they fight each other, bare knuckles, and they just have this whole circuit. And they have a trash talk subculture that predates YouTube. They would make DVDs talking
VHS
trash.
tapes,
right, and then mail them to each other. Oh, I got a package today. Here, oh, it's a DVD. You put it in the DVD, and some guy telling you that you're garbage and he's going to beat you up. And then you say, "Oh, wait, get my camera." And your brother gets the camera, you record another DVD, and you keep doing this until you arrange a date to fight bare knuckles. And then it just keeps going. And then at the end of the fight, you say, "This is the feud between our clans is done. We're never going to fight again." And then 2 weeks later, you're fighting. But this is the tradition that Tyson Fury and his brother Huey come from. So their dad was a bare knuckle fighter, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
But these guys have only ever done ring boxing. But in the documentary, you see the disdain that the bare knuckle guys have for people who fight in the ring.
Well, and listen, if Fury does lose on Saturday, in his head, it still wasn't even a real fight.
Well, exactly.
There were gloves on. Right. We got to do the rematch in a parking lot outside of Kroger's, right. And we're going to find out who the real man in this equation is.
Exactly. Ring boxing.
Ring boxing. What do you do with the ropes? Ridiculous.
Everyone circle up. Place your pari-mutuel bets.
Oh, man. All right. On the other side of the break, we'll quickly touch on the PBC card coming up this weekend. We'll give you our YouTube picks of the week. We're going to keep adding to the playlist. Stick around. We'll be right back here on Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Welcome back to Fight Network Boxing Weekly. Corey Erdman and Morgan Campbell here with you. We touched on Klitschko and Fury, which is this weekend at 4:45, but also that afternoon, we have some action on NBC, a broadcast I'm going to be on for PBC. Jermall Charlo defending his super welterweight title. That's the parlance we use, by the way. We go with the supers now.
Okay, we don't say junior middleweight.
It's just a company memo. Super welterweight title against our man Silky Wilkie Campford, who has one of the best Instagram pages in all of boxing, featuring some gems such as Silky Wilkie when he was younger and living in Haiti, sleeping with his head in a refrigerator in order to remain cool. Remember that one, Morgan?
Yeah, and that doesn't work because that'll just burn out the engine in your refrigerator
and ruins your food.
Yes,
which is paramount to succeeding in getting out of Haiti if that's your goal.
Which makes me think that's a tall tale because there's no way Silky Wilkie's parents would let him spoil food. Because if you're really
it was one of those bar fridges. To be fair,
if life it
was right on the ground.
No. Because if you're grinding to the point that you think that you use the refrigerator as air conditioning,
yes,
then you're also at the point where you're not wasting any food.
Yes.
Silky Wilkie's parents would never have let him. Never have let him do that. Never, ever, ever. That's a tall tale.
There was another boxer who told me there was a point where they had like an ice box for their food, and at some point they had to choose between like using the ice box to keep cool or spoiling the food.
Yes.
So this is something that happens all the time.
Spoil. I can guarantee if there's parents around, the food did not spoil.
So he just took the selfie
of
him in the refrigerator and then because he cooled down to get out of there.
And he knew people would believe it.
Right, of course. Yeah.
No, I can almost guarantee you that no one's parents are letting them spoil that much food.
Well, Silky Wilkie also to this day drives a like plain white like work van that just says Silky on the side in cursive writing, which I really appreciate.
You know who's not going to squander his career high payday from PBC this weekend?
Yeah, Silky Wilkie Campford. Exactly. You know who might have squandered a good portion of his career high payday from last time was Jermall Charlo, who TMZ spotted at King of Diamonds in Atlanta. I think it was King of Diamonds. It was at a strip club in Texas. Sorry, so it wasn't King of Diamonds. Spending $25,000 at the strip club.
Are those guys
while wearing his belt?
Are those guys really making that much money?
Well, I don't know. And
people I worry about and people I don't worry about. Like if Mayweather's going to go spend that kind of money,
doesn't bother me.
The guy has 9 figures in his bank account. Pacquiao to a point, he can do that. Although he's a good boy now, he doesn't gamble and shoot pool anymore.
Right.
He has all these hangers on, right? But at the same time, Pacquiao still has this gigantic mountain of money upon top of which he lives. But the Charlos of the world, do they really have that kind of cash?
Well, here's the thing. I know that it is from knowing people in the nightclub business.
Yes.
Just around the corner in some cases, that sometimes when they bring in a guy whose sort of gimmick it is to throw some money around, they'll give him spending cash to just throw away. So it's not even his own money.
Okay.
He's getting his appearance fee and he's sort of throwing it away. Like Floyd, when you pay him to come to a club, he more or less just throws that right back into the crowd. He does it for fun. No one's paying Jermall Charlo $25,000 to show up at the strip club because that doesn't make me want to go to the strip club.
No.
I go to the strip club to see women. I don't go there just to see Jermall Charlo, and I don't think the women would go to the female strip club to see Jermall Charlo anyway. So I don't know what the benefit of having him there for $25,000 would be.
Jermall Charlo is an outstanding fighter. But
yes.
Yeah, he's not the person that you look for at a strip club.
No, he doesn't move the.
And he's not anywhere famous enough outside of his hometown, which he's from Houston.
Yeah.
Maybe not even in all of Houston, but in his neighborhood in Houston.
Yeah.
Maybe not even then, because if you put him on a flyer in his neighborhood in Houston, say, hey, Jamar Charlo is going to be at the club tonight, it's going to be a bunch of people who be like, oh, wait a minute, I already know that guy.
Yeah.
I don't have to
I was there anyway.
Right.
Yeah. And there are a lot of great strip clubs in Houston. You don't need to go to the one where Jamal Charlo's starring. Anyway, we got to quickly get to our YouTube picks of the week. So, all right, in honor of a Mexican fighter stealing the undercard on a major pay-per-view, go back to 2005 and watch Jorge Arce versus Hussein Hussein, the first one. The second one was a complete blowout, but the first one was a bloodbath and was fantastic. But again, empty crowd, amazing fight in the ring.
Was it Jorge Arce or Mijares that used to come to the ring with the lollipop?
Arce, yeah. El Travieso, with the lollipop riding a horse.
The troublemaker.
The troublemaker, yeah.
Perfect. So my YouTube pick of the week in honor of physically imposing Englishmen challenging for the world heavyweight title from the summer of 1987. Frank Bruno against Tim Witherspoon at Wembley Stadium, like a packed Wembley Stadium. And when we read Black Genesis, the story about the prize fighters, the lead up to this fight sort of reminded me of the way they would describe those fights, because it's like Frank Bruno, where you would just show up at the fight with like all your backers, all your buddies, and there's this big sea of people, and you're in the middle, and they, hey, we're here, let's fight. This is like when you see Frank Bruno's ring entrance. There's all these fans trying to squeeze in on the barricades. There's like all these cops around him, and he's like in the middle of this retinue of people. You get to see toe-to-toe action, pretty high skill level.
Yep.
Tim Witherspoon using the crab defense, which is the cousin of the Philly shell. It's like the Philly shell for people that don't care that much about defense. And he's gassed by the fifth round, but he keeps going. Dramatic finish. Crazy wild right hands from Tim Witherspoon, which I feel like was a tactic. Like he was throwing them crazy by like on purpose. Dramatic finish. Action all the way through, even though they're two big guys. You'll enjoy it.
All right. Enjoy those two fights. Enjoy the action this weekend. And, of course, we hope you enjoyed this program as well. For Morgan Campbell, I'm Corey Erdman. We'll see you guys next week.